Welcome to the podcast PUNKT.UA with Tinka
and Vadim. This podcast is dedicated to Ukrainian studies.
We conduct interviews with scholars from the UNDIPUS project,
which stands for Undisciplined Pluralizing Ukrainian Studies, Understanding the War in Ukraine.
Join us on the PUNKT.UA podcast.
Yeah, welcome today. It's our Ukrainicum special podcast. The Ukrainicum is a summer school in the small, beautiful city of Greifswald, and it's every year. And it's a mixture of lectures and language courses. And it's every year. For example, the last years we had the topics Thinking Under Bombing, Feminism, Gender Queer, or After the Empire, Ukrainian Post-Colonial Entanglements. And this year we had Wounds of War, Ukraine after 2 years of invasion. And during these 2 weeks, there was a special guest. It was Olga Shparaga, who had an open discussion. It was about the topic Living After the End of History, Peace and War in the Post-Soviet Condition. But before we talk about this lecture and lots of other things, I would like to introduce you to our listeners. Olga, you studied philosophy in Minsk, you founded the A Club, and you teach and did researches in different countries like Czech, Poland, Lithuania, Germany. You're the member of the feminist group of the Coordination Council, I think it's called. And I would like to give you the microphone and ask you what would you like to add to introduce yourself, be talking about what's the EC Club, what's your main research topics during the last years.
Thank you very much for inviting me here, for this possibility to speak about me, about Belarus, of course, about our context. What about me? The last most important thing is my book about Belarusian protest, Belarusian Revolution and Progress, in my words. I published this book 2021 in Germany, in Surkamp, Belarusian Revolution with Female Face. And this idea that women, feminists, queer feminists, are very active during protest and in everyday life with different form of weak resistance. It was my topic in this book, and now I'm comparing from my Belarusian perspective, but with other different, with Polish, GDR perspective, this different form of weak resistance. If we speak about marginalized group of people or marginalized people, they only have this possibility to develop different forms of weak resistance, but to analyze these different forms of weak resistance can help us to understand the situation when we get or have protest. Because sometimes we can't understand why in this moment we have uprising, we have people at the streets, and analyzing of this different form of everyday resistance can help us to understand from this perspective what people are developing in small collectives through caring, practicing. And I research this topic from the perspective of protest, but from the perspective of future for our societies, democratic and for authoritarian states and regimes as well, because I think this caring perspective is like alternative to our consumption-oriented societies, to toxic, violent conditions and relations. We have enough of this, and I think that we need alternatives, and I connect this alternative with caring practices.
The public discussion at Ukrainicum was under the title Living After the End of History, Peace and War in the Post-Soviet Conditions. May you summarize this discussion for us? What was the topic? What was the conclusion? I know you had together with another co-speaker
from Armenia. Yeah, the idea was to compare our different trajectories after 1991, because we were part of this Soviet Union, and now we are in between. And after the escalation of this war, we don't speak that there is post-Soviet space. I thought about this. What is it, this space in between? Maybe there is about different names. For example, there is about Eastern Europe, but bigger, about expanding Eastern Europe from one part, because we want to be part of this space. And on the other hand, we still have this so to say, authoritarian mechanism and practices, and that because we can speak about post-Soviet legacy in our countries. And I think it's very important to discuss and to understand how our countries are developing. And there is, of course, it was, and after discussion, still I had this question about conditions of comparing our different contexts, because there are different contexts when we speak, if we speak about Belarus and Armenia, for example. And I understood this from this discussion as well, that we have different situation, because Armenia, for example, has another neighbors and another historical and another authoritarian countries, and on the other hand, this discussion about collective identity, self-understanding of societies and culture is more clear in Armenia, because there is a big history and a big history with diaspora, and there is a very, very specific case of Armenia, and it was interesting to say and to understand another time that we have some part of common history, but we have a lot of differences. And it means that we need to speak with each other, because we still have dependency from Russia, and Russia is a very dangerous neighbor. And I think we need to understand how to coexist, how to help, how to develop solidarity with each other, and that because we need these discussions. Mm-hmm. Because one of conclusion was that our society are for solidarity with each other, with Ukraine in this situation of the escalation of war, and that because we need discussion to understand how we can collaborate, how we can imagine our future, our democratic future for Belarus. And it's very important to think now about democratic future for Belarus. And it's not so easy, because on the one hand, there is, of course, danger of Russia, but on the other hand, it's very difficult, as I understand now, to develop our future in democratic way.
You're here in the context of the UNDIPUS project. Can you tell us what is your research project here?
I had communication with Olga Plahotnik because of feminist discourse and because of some ideas which I also share with Olga. For example, the perspective proposed by Olga Plahotnik and Maria Mayerchik, that we can speak, or we need to speak about the time of nation and feminist time. And I like and support this idea very much. And I discussed with Olga my interpretation and my ideas about this perspective. And my research is connecting with this perspective and with thinking about protest, about the war, about the future, from this feminist perspective. And now my topic is caring democracy in these caring practices, but all of them are connecting, of course, with current condition and current situation. This situation is war, of course, and there is, from my point of view, not only about Ukraine, there is about region, and that because I'm preparing all the time some text or reflection to this topic and discuss this with my German, first of all, German and Austrian colleagues, because in Germany and in Austria, there are a lot of misunderstanding of the situation and
the situation where in Belarus, or
in this war situation, I would say, because Belarusian situation is now also a part of this war situation. And it's I think that our country Belarus and Ukraine don't have enough subjectivity still. And I think it's very important to speak about this subjectivity that we are sovereign state, that we think about us like European state, that we have this perspective, that we want to speak with other societies, with other communities from different contexts, like equal partners, and not like smaller brothers or sisters. And I think that this feminist perspective can help us. For example, my last text about feminist caring solidarity in the situation of war, and the idea of this caring solidarity is about the critique of paternalistic solidarity. Mm-hmm. And caring perspective can help us to develop this non-paternalistic solidarity when we speak with each other like equal and not like Europeans look at Ukrainians or Belarusian, they need our help, and we knew all about these countries and how to help. And it's not my idea that the idea of feminist researcher Seven Huysen from Netherlands, and she developed this notion of caring solidarity, and she shows that for solidarity, caring helps solidarity not to be paternalistic, and solidarity helps care not to be private, to be in public sphere. And I like this idea, and I developed this idea in the case of solidarity with Ukraine and with Belarus.
About your book, you already mentioned, which you wrote like 3 years ago. How it was called?
The Revolution with Female Face, the case of Belarus.
I would like you to give us a small summary of this book, why you wrote it, the main points of it.
Yeah, the name of this book is Revolution with Female Face, but this book is not only about activities of women and feminists and queer community, but about the solidarity of the whole Belarusian society or within the whole Belarusian society, because the most important thing was that it was this solidarity beyond borders of different social groups. And it was very important that one group inspired another group. And it was for first time in Belarus. And it was like I can compare now after 3 years, after reading this and that the best way to compare Belarusian revolution is to compare with GDR, peaceful revolution from 1989, because it was about uprising of people, of demos, so to say, of forming of demos with the idea to self-determine, to self-running their own country, political. It was in GDR and in Belarus about people's self-determination, and women were very visible and very important part of Belarusian revolution. And if we think and look at history, we will see that women are always a very strong part of revolutions, because women are answering to this very dangerous situation. They react in this situation quickly and more like a group in different revolutions. And I understood in summer 2020 in Belarus that we have different forms of activities of women, and that women proposed examples or proposed pattern for the whole society, for different social group, what to do, how to be active, how to collaborate with each other. And I understood that I need to describe this, because if I will not describe this, maybe no one will do this. And I have this perspective, this feminist perspective, and this critical understanding. And it was important for me to understand and describe from below, with bringing names of women for history. And this book is about these names, form of collaboration, form of solidarities, first of all of women, but not only, because there were a lot of different forms of solidarity. And I introduced also this notion of care, because care was very, very important. Situation was very violent, and people needed to be very sensitive, to develop attentiveness, to develop understanding in every situation, because it was this police violence and situation of imprisoned people. We have now at least 1,500 imprisoned, political imprisoned, and 2,000 people are released. We have 10,000, 100,000 of people who are traumatized through this protest, but for first 3 months from June to September 2020, it was about very positive emotions, about inspiration, about thinking or feeling that we can have future and democratic future for Belarus, and that because Belarusians still have this very polarized emotions and understanding of this event. People still have hope, but it's very difficult to have this hope under this condition and new situation after the February 2022. But I suppose, and polls show this, that people don't refuse to think about situation of Belarus like about from this perspective of the future, of the democratic future, because it was about people uprising. It was very important that one in five, every fifth person took part in this protest. It's very big. The protests were everywhere, in small cities, in villages, different forms. And that because people got this understanding, this feeling of another society and another future.
Maybe you can shortly summarize how it came to this kind of uprising, kind of revolution, because it's not common to have mass protests in Belarus. It's a very autocratic system, very violent, repressive.
There were some protests before in Belarus. For example, in 2006, after the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, in 2004, Belarusian civil society was inspired, and there were how many? About 50,000 people at the street, but for some days. And in 2020, we got for first time so many people. So 100,000 of people. And there are a lot of preconditions, of course, and COVID-19 is one of preconditions, because before COVID, Lukashenko interpreted Belarus as a best social state, or state with the best social policy in this region, in post-Soviet space. How we can characterize this social policy? We can speak about erosion of these social institutions. And different research show this, that people were not satisfied with this institution, but they didn't know what to do. And then in the situation of COVID, Lukashenko said, I don't want to have responsibility for your death, and I will not help you, and our very good social state will not help you. And then people who supported Lukashenko before, first of all, elderly people, for example, or people not from the big city, but from villages, they understood that they don't need this social state. And this social state doesn't work, and people don't have political rights. Why we need this state and this Lukashenko if we have nothing? And it was this understanding in 2020. And on the one hand, it was this understanding that we have nothing and we don't need Lukashenko. On the other hand, people started, in the situation of COVID, develop, like in other countries, different forms of supporting on solidarity through whole the society, different NGOs and artists, people from all the possible crises started to organize something to react, to help each other in this situation. And then, so to say, people understood that they can develop this country in their own way without Lukashenko. And the third precondition was that we got a new leader, because there were this presidential election in August 2020, and we got new people, not from our political circle, so to say, but new people. And these people said, we are not politicians, but we will try to organize the life in Belarus in another way. We think about democracy, and we need the help of the whole society. And people started to help organize rally for these new faces. Viktor Babarika was one of these faces. And it was such an activity. They understood that they have, knowledge, they have skills. They started to develop professional solidarity, for example. They understood that they are part of different professional group, or they are part, for example, of women communities, or they are at university. We didn't have before such solidarity at university, student solidarity, for example. And in these new conditions, preconditions, people understood in these different groups and as a whole society that they can develop a lot. Every person tried to develop the best what this person could, and we can find such a description of revolution today. For example, if we read Yasef Bayat, he described Arab Spring Revolution, everyday life of Arab Spring Revolution. It was a book from 2021, and it was about this support and take part of every person with the best, what this person can do. And then people are connecting through technologies. They can develop networking very quick through technology. And then we have these people at the streets. The next question is how to develop this community, how to make from these activities institutions. There is a big question for all the revolution in 21st century. I think that's a new, very important step for Belarusian society now. First of all, in diaspora, because people don't have understanding how they can develop this society and community, Belarusian political community, in democratic way.
Yeah, thank you for this answer. I wanted to ask, what about situation in Belarus now, in Belarusian society when the war started? How it did change Belarusian society? What the attitudes towards Lukashenko now? How opinion about Lukashenko changed, and whether it's changed with the war, when the full-scale invasion started in 2022?
Yeah, Ukraine was a very important topic for Belarusian society all the time. And I would say, first of all, after 2004, after the Orange Revolution, and Ukraine was a very important topic, but different topic for Lukashenko and for Belarusian society. Because for Lukashenko, the development in Ukraine was all the time about danger. And Lukashenko's idea was that we don't need such protest, we don't need such active society, that because we need to prevent this activity. And for Belarusian society, it was like model to act. For people from NGOs, it was like a model to organize solidarity, to develop solidarity, to develop political and activist activities. And after 2014, as the war started, Lukashenko started to speak about war more, and it was more about fears that Belarusian need to have fears that they can have such a war situation if they will not loyal to Lukashenko, if the society will active. And I would say that a part of society had these fears about war, because before 2014, the most important issue in Lukashenko propaganda was about World War II and about this legacy that Belarusians are peaceful people, a very strong social state, and we don't have war. After 2014, this sad thing appeared, that we are peaceful, we don't have war, and we don't have war if we compare Belarus with Ukraine. And that because some part of people supported Lukashenko in this way, but not NGOs, of course. For NGOs, the idea that we need to be active and we need fight against Lukashenko for democracy in Belarus was most important. And that because after the escalation of war, reaction of people were also positive and negative. The active part of society was very developed different solidarity actions, and we have at least 1,600 people were detained over solidarity action with Ukraine. More than 50 people are in prison because of solidarity with Ukraine. But if we speak about this part of society which had these fears referring to war, they have now more fears, and some part of this part of society support Lukashenko more. There is about 10% because we don't have war in new version of war, so to say, because there were fears before, but now there is a bigger war, a very dangerous war, and the idea that Belarusian army doesn't take part in this war. People support this idea, and different polls show all the time that about 90% of people doesn't support the idea that Belarusian army will take part in this war. But we have still the situation after 2020, after protest 2020, and in general, people are not satisfied with the situation in Belarus, and they don't support Lukashenko actively. And they are now a little bit more loyal to Lukashenko because we don't have war on our territory. But in general, people are against Lukashenko because we have enough violence in our country.
I have another question. According to the uprising 2020, you named like some reasons. For example, people were not satisfied with the COVID-19 policy. They had alternative persons who could lead. Was it also a question when I just compared, for example, with Maidan in 2014? Is it a question, do we want to go in direction of the West, or do we want to go in direction of the Russian Federation or the regime leading Russian Federation? Because this was one of the main points in Maidan, as I understood it right. Was it also in discussion in the revolution in 2020 in Belarus?
Mm-hmm. We didn't have such discussion because, as I said, it was in 2020 in Belarus about the self-determination. That society understood that people from different groups and society as whole understood that we can do in our way. We don't need such a authoritarian regime and authoritarian leader. And it was Belarusians were open, so to say, to solidarity with every person, every state, every society. With Russia, Belarusians were open to solidarity with Russia as well. If Putin could, I can't imagine this, but it was this idea as well that Putin and Russian society can help Belarusian to be democratical state. And in this way, there are different cases in Ukraine and in Belarus. But we can find what is common for our both revolution, because Ukrainian Maidan was a revolution of dignity. And it was very important that people, every time in Ukraine there is a revolution against leader, against democratically elected government because of corruption, because of organization of different institutions. And in this sense, we can compare Ukrainian revolution as revolution of dignity with Belarusian revolution, because the most important slogan in Belarus was we want to be called people, зваться людьми. There is from the Yanka Kupala poem, and this idea that we are not people under this authoritarian regime, only loyal to Lukashenko, we don't have right. It was about, as I said, about the self-determination. It means about willingness to have right, to be citizens, active citizens, to rule, and to have another president and to have another government. And I think that we can, in this sense, we can compare with Ukraine, because it's every time people in Ukraine, every revolution are not satisfied with the policy, and they are still looking for new ways how they can organize in democratical way.
Yeah, regarding differences between revolution in Ukraine and Belarus, at least from my point of view, that Euromaidan was very kind of about national identity and about nation in general. So, but in Belarus, I think this national element and sometimes even like nationalistic element, which was during Euromaidan, is not presented in Belarus protest. Whether it's true or I'm wrong.
Yes, in my book, I'm describing this from the perspective of post-nation. It's, of course, difficult to understand what is it, but I think in Belarusian case, if we speak about this post-nation, this revolution was not about identity in cultural sense, that we are different if we compare with Russians or Ukrainians. It was important to be a self-ruling community. And there is about civical nation, but if we speak about Ukraine, there is either also about civic nation. It's difficult with this nation, this notion of nation. I think that we can start to speak about civic nation, but then we very quickly go to the history, cultural self-understanding, this comparing with what Belarusians are, we compare with Russian and so on. And I think that in Belarus, the most important was this solidarity beyond borders of different social groups. And I think that this question of identity in cultural terms, we didn't have this question. And because of this, we could develop this solidarity, because people understood themselves in different way. But the solidarity against Lukashenko was so big and so necessary that all these differences were not so important. Maybe if we think about Belarus, if I compare with Belarus with other countries, Belarus are more homogeneous. We have Belarusians speak, most of Belarusians speak Russian. Part of Belarusians speak Belarusian language, but more than 80% said that we need Belarusian language. There is our legacy. We don't want to speak actively Belarusian language, but it's very important for us. And I say that Belarusians are bilingual. Belarusian language in many cases is passive, but people can read, people can speak as well, but they prefer to speak Russian language. But it's not a question that we don't need our state, for example. We have our state, we have our history, but it's not so important to speak about this. More important is to fight against authoritarian regime, to develop democracy in some way. I would say that now in diaspora we have more discussion about this, and there is about diaspora, of course, and in the future we will have more discussion about this. But there are some preconditions that this question are discussing in another way in Belarus. For example, the most important idea for Belarusians that we can share our history with our other communities, because we have common history with Poland, with Lithuania, with Ukraine, and we don't need to fight for understanding that there is only Belarusian example or Belarusian part of history. We have a lot to share, and we have a lot of shared events and history, but all of this is not about our weakness, so to say. And in my sense, there is about this post-nation, not to discuss every time there is only Belarusians, only for Belarusians, but we can coexist with us, and first of all, democratic countries. Another question is about Russia, how to exist with authoritarian regime. But in my opinion, there is about politics, not about culture. It can be about culture, but it's first of all about different political regime, and we need to develop another political regime and to understand how to develop this regime.
You already named some events which were important. For example, the Orange Revolution, also Maidan. When you see such big events, for example, how can you describe the relationship between people from grassroots movement, people from feminist movement, people from civil society, how this event changed or influenced the relationship between each other?
People from NGOs looked all the time at the Ukraine like an example that we can develop through this solidarity from below. We can develop resistance, we can develop revolution. It was the nearest example. And the cooperation between Belarusian and Ukrainian and Russian activists as well, there were a strong connection. And with Lithuania, for example, because in 2005, the Belarusian European University in Exile was, for example, established in Vilnius, because this university was forcibly closed in Belarus in 2004. And it was cooperation between Lithuanian researcher and activists and people from different scene and Belarusians and with Poland activists. This cooperation was possible because Lukashenko thought all the activity outside of this political sphere is not danger. And that because, I suppose, for Belarusians, NGOs and activists, it's very important to show that they have solidarity with Ukraine. And after 2020, between 200,000 to 1 million Belarusians left Belarus because of repression. The new wave was after the escalation of war. And at least 2,600 NGOs were closed in Belarus because of this protest. And activists left Belarus as well because it was danger to stay in Belarus. People were under the threat of arrest. And all of these people, a lot of these people, not all of course, but a lot of these people tried to organize something in the diaspora because Belarusians needed this help. And for example, women with children and feminists organized these spaces in different countries, in Georgia, in Lithuania, in Poland, in different cities in Poland. And then after the escalation of war, Belarusian activists started to organize these spaces for Ukrainians. It was very important to show, to support, and I think that there were conflict. There are some conflict because Lukashenko is, of course, co-aggressor in this war, and there are conflict because of understanding of the role of Belarusian society and Belarusians. But the most popular position in NGOs, Belarusian NGOs in diaspora, is to help Belarusians, to help people from Ukraine, and not to look at these conflicts, to avoid to take part in these conflicts, and to help each other. I have a lot of friends from from the NGOs who are now outside of Belarus who try to develop such initiatives, where Belarusians cooperate with Ukraine and develop events, conferences, discussions, exhibitions.
The experience of exile is a huge one. A lot of people, activists from Belarus, left after the protests, you as well. How can you go on with this project to build up democracy in Belarus from here? So you have a separated society. One part is still in Belarus, one part is outside Belarus. And also here I see this similarity, for example, for the situation in Ukraine. So a part is forced to stay in Ukraine or stayed in Ukraine, and a lot of people had to leave or wanted to leave this country. So also here we have a divided society. How you keep in touch? How is the exchange?
The answer for me was all the time before this 2020 situation and living in diaspora, the answer was connecting with living in community and with community. And in my case, I was part and very active part of different communities. A club, European College of Liberal Arts, was one of these communities. And for example, we have this community all the time in different forms. Now, because one part of our colleagues are in Belarus, that because we can be active as a club, because our institution was forcibly closed as well, and it's danger for our colleagues. And then we develop 2 or 3 projects, some in Belarus in very sensible way, and some outside of Belarus. And we are now, for example, in different countries, but we use this technology, digital technologies. We have, of course, from time to time offline meetings, but I don't know, after 4 years, we still have common understanding. We have new understanding what we need. For example, we are developing at the moment such analytical projects, Fifth Republic. We already started with this project in 2021. And it was about analyzing of political field after 2020, outside and inside of Belarus. And now our idea is to analyze political community. If we have a political community, where are divisions in this community? Because we think that we don't have this division only between Belarus and outside Belarus and inside Belarus. We have this division inside Belarus, we have this division in diaspora, and that because we need to understand connections and to understand different connections and different divisions. This project supports me very, very much, because it's very important to have connection with my colleagues and to understand that we can develop common understanding of situation, that we can understand which problems our society have, our political community. We are working with understanding of agenda, agency, of self-understanding of different political groups. And I see that we are a leftist group, and we have not enough such a leftist group. And our idea was and still is to find people who will work together with us to develop analytical text, for example, to take part in discussion from this leftist perspective. And I see that there are a lot of such initiatives. For example, queer feminists are connecting through Telegram chat, and we have more than 150 activists in that chat, and it's a new phenomenon. We have such a community after 2020. And it was in this year the third conference after 2020 of our feminist community. And it was very lively. And I think that such meetings are in different part of our new community. Human rights activists have a lot different project, and then they have from time to time these offline meetings, auch in Poland, Lithuania, in different countries. And I see that people are still active and they still have this positive feeling that we need to develop. There is our people, there is our community, we are in different countries, but it's very important and that we have common understanding and that we can discuss with each other, to be open, and that we this understanding, common understanding, is precondition. We had this understanding in Belarus, and to have this understanding and this possibility of communication, of developing new project, there is a very positive feeling.
I thought about, next to all this important things and events, like there was revolution, the attack of Ukraine, political prisoners, things like precarious topics like refugees or ecology. Is there any space for this to discuss in Belarusian society? Because I know there, from Poland, I know no border activists who are in good contact with Belarusian activists, because the border is quite hard observed and there's a lot of pushbacks and people who go through this road, through these woods, and it's very, very dangerous. This, for example, or topics like ecology.
If we speak about ecology, it's very popular in Belarus because our NGO's field was formed through this Chernobyl catastrophe. And the first NGOs in Belarus were referring to Chernobyl. And that because we had and we still have very active community, and we have networking of ecological NGO, and they already developed vision of democratic transformation of Belarus from this ecological perspective. They have recommendations, a map, and so on, because it's a very active community. Most of these people are outside of Belarus because organizations were forcibly closed. And I knew about these people. And on the first part of our Fifth Republic project, there were questions to, so to say, politicians, new political activists. And the question about ecology were part of this. It was about different dimension of democratic future of Belarus, and ecology was part of this. And if we speak about refugees, this question is more discussed in Poland, but in the diaspora, this question is discussing, referring to the situation of different countries, of different people, and the way, and we still have organization, for example, Human Constanta. This organization was our partner, the first partner, and one of the activists, Nasta Loika, is imprisoned in Belarus. She decided to stay in Belarus and was arrested. And Human Constanta is working with this topic, refugees. I see these faces, these persons who were active before, but we have now new faces, Belarus. And this question of Belarusian culture in such a nationalist terms plays now a role, because I think it's a part of diaspora everywhere. It's the best way easiest way to speak about community, to speak in these terms. What is our culture in such a terms, traditional culture, and I think there are such patterns, and people look at our other diaspora and start to discuss problems in these terms. I think it's possible, and maybe it's a good way as well, but we need different ways. We need to speak about human rights, we need to speak about future institution, about democracy, how democracy can work, and not all the time about, I don't know, this traditional dancing, for example. It's a good topic to have evening together, but to speak about culture and about the situation only in these terms, it helps not so much.
Olga, what will be your next book about?
I hope my book will be about caring democracy. I think there is also an alternative to this understanding of nationalist democracy, national community. I think that caring community is an alternative to consumpting community and nationalist community, where heroes are most important figures. And in caring community, very different people interconnecting and helping each other are in the center.
Olga, thank you for the interview. Thank you for being here in Greifswald. It's a pleasure, and I wish you the best.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you myself.
Yes, thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye. It was the podcast PUNKT.UA
which is part of the UNDIPUS project at the University of Greifswald.
with Vadim,
And Tinka.
supported by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research.
Join us on the PUNKT.UA podcast.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.